Welcome to our presentation highlighting emerging trends within education to reach marginalized learners through unbundling of the context and content in higher education. We're combining this with microlearning and microcredentialing practices. To understand why we recommend this approach, one should first understand the scope and depth of the current educational structure and the profile of marginalization. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 26, education has been described as an essential human right. And while the benefits of education have been confirmed for individuals, families, communities, and countries, there are still a few troubling gaps in the accessibility, participation, quality, and success of educational systems, particularly for marginalized learners. The two groups of marginalized learners in our comparative study include learners from sub-Saharan Africa and Aboriginal learners in Canada. While geographically separate and culturally distinct, both groups of learners share similar profiles in low educational achievement in comparison to their non-Indigenous counterparts. So, if education is the pathway, why are the doorways into our institutions so narrow? To understand the systematic failures in educational success within our case study groups, it is important to understand the politics of the marginalized. Marginalization consists of systemic inequities. These are social, political, and economic injustices, and they are rooted within power relations where imbalance is endemic. The historic attitudes and policies of colonization for both sub-Saharan Africans and Canadian Aborigines are similar. The framework created through educational policies lingers within current legislation and processes. A profile of marginalized status for these groups includes a history of pervasive poverty, incomplete and low educational achievement, unemployed or underemployed status, single parenthood with generational dependence within a single household, being a minority, being female, and living in an unsafe or insecure environment. These barriers create a scenario of delayed post-secondary enrollment for the majority of marginalized persons who do not pursue post-secondary education. To understand how this history of marginalization has impacted both communities, one only has to look at the educational statistics. This diagram from 2018 demonstrates the low completion rate at each level from primary to upper secondary school in the month. A significant number of children drop out during key transition points in school. If we look at the situation for sub-Saharan Africa, we will see that 81% of the children enroll in primary school, but only 63% complete primary school. For lower secondary, there is an enrollment rate of 63%, but only 38% complete lower secondary school. So, statistically, 42% of children in sub-Saharan Africa never make it to secondary school. Based on this information, there is therefore only a small group of learners that have adequate literacy skills that enable them to take advantage of current access of pre-university program paths to higher education. These patterns are similar for both marginalized groups, namely for children in sub-Saharan Africa and for Aboriginal children in Canada. Significant numbers of children in Namibia are dropping out of school. And according to the Namibia Labour Force Survey of 2018, these young adolescents between the ages of 15 and 19 years are also tracked as part of the labour force and represent the highest segment of the unemployed in the country. Those who are able to find employment are often underpaid and underemployed due to their limited education and literacy. And many young adolescents therefore end up on the streets and contribute to the already high crime rate. There are no straight comparative statistics between Namibia and Aboriginal communities, but the independent statistics reveal a similar pattern of low academic achievement, poverty, and cycles of crime and violence. In Canada, the Indigenous population is the fastest growing segment of the total population, with a 42% increase from 2006 to 2015. Over 64% of the Indigenous population is under the age of 25, and over half of them are living in their reserve communities. Currently, only 4 out of every 10 Indigenous youth have completed a high school education. So far, we've presented the failure rates of the current educational streams. It is now time to look at the educational pathways and their governance, which is directly related to leadership within the systems. In Africa, the educational systems fall under national governance structures for administration, accountability, and funding. The structural organization for band-operated schools differs significantly in Canada. These schools are managed according to the Indian Act, which positions the Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada with ultimate authority over all education-related matters. Changes toward globalization require skilled workers with literacy levels that allow them to work, grow, and learn. Our project, the Level Up Project, presents an alternative pathway to participate in ongoing education for marginalized low education learners.
Current higher education and training structures exclude most educationally marginalized learners from moving forward with gaining knowledge and skills needed to gain meaningful employment. The Level Up concept proposes to create a pathway into higher education and training using emerging trends from business, industry, and technology. These trends include unbundling both the context and process of higher education and using microlearning content to provide knowledge and skills concepts and to provide microcredentials in a progressively sequential manner to authenticate knowledge. These trends have been recently recognized within higher education but have not been widely accepted or integrated. So just what do we mean by unbundling? It's the process of disaggregating and rebundling of educational components to create access, equity, and quality education. They include the processes, content, delivery, credentialing, and pathways that exist within higher education. It is a complex method, but flexible and responsive both to learner needs and institutions. Microlearning is content that's created and delivered in small units. It's a short learning session, 5 to 10 minutes, and is scalable for delivery on most devices, including mobile phones. It's available on demand 24/7. It generally contains one outcome per unit and can act as a standalone unit of learning. These standalone units are aggregated to create learning credentials and/or courses. It works well for competencies and can be adapted to support more complex types of learning. It's student-directed and based on previous learning and skill sets. Microcredentialing is the formal recognition of small units of knowledge or skills. They're concrete demonstrations of learning. They're often self-directed by the student but supported by the institution. They are transportable into larger credentials within the higher education stream, such as a subject, grade equivalency, or a 3-credit course. Our proposal here is still in the conceptual stages, so we won't be providing specifics of creation and implementation, rather a broad overview of how these processes can be used to create a pathway into higher learning that's supported by existing organizations and funders. The name Level Up is a reference to the gaming community where players cannot advance to the next level until current level points have been earned. In the same way, our learners will participate in learning activities until they acquire the points needed to move to the next level. We'll start with an overview map of the project so you can see the elements involved and how they situate to one another. It looks busy, but we'll break it down into its constituent steps in the following slides. This framework is based on the existing educational structures in both Namibia and Canada and focuses on the entry and exit points for education as they exist now and how we see a Level Up project supporting and expanding capacities to recapture learners who have left formal learning prior to graduation. Based on non-completion statistics, grades 4 to 8 are critical points of departure, with few re-entry points due to literacy requirements for upgrading programs which are more readily available to learners in grades 9 to 11. The steps 1 through 6 demonstrate programs we found that provided options for re-entry. They consist of readiness programs, work training placements, and non-university credentialing programs. Almost all of them require a minimum of senior secondary skill competencies and literacy. The Level Up project, delineated in the blue oval, would create an entry path at Level 1 with basic literacy skills concentrating on language arts, math, and science, and provide a sequential path through the grade level competencies from grades 6 to 12, allowing students to apply to existing access paths into higher education and training upon completion. While this pathway is student-driven and offered as a primarily asynchronous option, ideally it would be situated within a college or university for the structure, recognition, and support the institution can offer for continuity of learning and bridging into one of its training or education streams in the future. This would offer credibility for the student and capture increasing numbers for the institution, and ultimately provide employees for business and industry. The educational institution would act as the project sponsor by providing a distinct educational unit to organize and administer functions such as student onboarding, supports and monitoring, verification and accumulation of competencies, credentialing of learning sets, funding where applicable, and curriculum, curation, and teaching and tutoring. Additionally, support from the government and business organizations responsible for education and employment would provide project status through formal recognition of the project process, their integration into the higher education organizations, and sustainability funding to meet the additional obligations of adopting the model within existing higher education environments. Once again, here's the overview map of the project proposal that addresses how the context and process of education and educational partnerships can be unbundled, disaggregated, and rebundled to create innovative approaches to education. The next few slides will offer a quick look at how the project might work in terms of the use of micro-content and microlearning.
There is an abundance of content currently online that supports elementary and secondary learning. They vary between wholly open content, such as Khan Academy, to wholly proprietary, such as IXL. There is flexibility in how content is created or curated for the Level Up project. Our intent is not to recreate the wheel, but to identify the curricular standards as sets of competencies, find the e-content that supports the standard, and organize it into a self-guided learning path for students. In this example from IXL, we focused on a grade 5 math curriculum that consists of 5 core conceptual areas divided into 25 learning units that is made up of 236 skills. A student would have to demonstrate competencies across all 5 core areas to complete the grade level for credentialing. We look at an example of how the micro-content is structured for skill 16, coordinate plane, for 3 competencies. The microlearning is divided into micro-content that demonstrates the problem. Learners that know this content can simply answer the question and move on to the next skill. However, if this is a new skill, the learner can get examples, microlearning, of what a coordinate plane is and how numbers are situated on the plane. Numerous short practice examples can be provided to help master the concept before retesting. In the event that the learner needs additional concept knowledge, linking into open source or custom videos can demonstrate the process in action. A last step in this process can be a request for an e-tutorial from the Level Up project unit. Once the skill is completed, it is checked off, allowing the learner to level up to the next unit. In terms of tracking progress, the curriculum is separated into learning concepts, then into learning units, and into learning competencies. This process is easily charted for student self-tracking and for institutional credentialing. The concept of micro-credentialing in the Level Up project involves breaking learning down into smaller units for focus, practice, and mastery. Micro-credentialing certifies a concrete demonstration of skill and content mastery. The process of breaking learning into smaller parts is a well-supported learning strategy and is supported within current e-learning practice. It supports incremental progress toward a learning goal. It can be very motivational and affirming for a learner to be able to check off skills and track progress. Once the unit competencies are completed, a badge or credential can be awarded. And when all unit badges are earned, they are applied to the concept, and while all concepts for the subject are completed, they are awarded a final badge certifying competence at that grade level for that subject.
Leadership theory and models are numerous and complex. There's a lot of overlap between models as attempts have been made to adapt leadership to fit specific types of organizations and changing work environments. Unfortunately, organizations do not exist within a vacuum and are seldom self-contained units. The challenges with leadership models is the process of accommodation of multiple models across changing environments where organizations and institutions are interdependent and share similar outcomes. We've adopted a leadership perspective for the Level Up project, which recognizes the uniqueness of institutions, organizations, and environments within which it will seek to reside. It's complicated, but here are the models at play within our project environment: systems theory, complexity theory, distributed leadership, shared leadership, and an ecological model. Our leadership approach for the Level Up project is firmly rooted within Riddle and Weber's wicked problem concept, where policy actions and solutions are defined by a number of characteristics that create paradoxical conditions. The project is part of this problem set as it is situated within the educational environment, a community, a governmental stream, a non-governmental stream, and business partners. All of these entities are complex systems within themselves with explicit and implicit leadership models already in play. They do not change quickly or adapt readily to innovation and change. This is the environment within which new pathways must be collaboratively negotiated for successful project creation, support, and success. Understanding these dynamics is critical and are discussed briefly as the rationale for our nested ecological model. Complexity theory emerged from systems theory as an interdisciplinary approach to more fully understand the processes of uncertainty within organizational and operational activities. It examines nonlinear processes and the types of interactions within systems and the feedback loops which they create. Our Level Up project will be one of those nonlinear processes that will need to navigate the complex layers, functions, and interactions within academic, governmental, and business sectors. The feedback loops of disruption will provide guidance on the internal pathways through these organizations to produce the least amount of disruption as possible while creating space for innovation and change. Based on the work of Stacy, complex adaptive systems can be broken into 4 distinct categories that help to determine the specific leadership needed to navigate complex systems: simple, chaotic, complicated, or complex environments. The Level Up project does not meet the criteria for a simple or chaotic system, but does identify with parts of both complex and complicated systems. The cause and effect of their activities are most often seen in retrospect and may require experts within the field to address. Their solutions emerge over time with the potential for many good solutions, and the leadership required within the system include probing, sensing, and responding to environmental elements, and to sensing, analyzing, and responding appropriately and effectively. Placing our project within the complexity matrix as articulated by Stacy will help to demonstrate the most logical leadership framework for the project. The lower the certainty within a system or process, and the lower the agreement on development and operation, the higher the opportunities for creativity and innovation. The challenge is to avoid the black hole of chaos where new ideas and innovations go to die. This can help to explain why educational change and innovation are so slow in coming and often fail. The processes are complex and interdependent upon a multitude of variables. This is why understanding the environments of each system and their complex operations is so critical to new project survival and success. Crisis is often the entry point into these systems. Alignment within levels of operation is crucial. As we drill down through the influencing leadership theories in which the Level Up project would exist, we come closer to a model designed specifically for and used within educational environments. Distributed leadership looks at the whole of the environment across which people engage and work rather than individual leadership qualities. The concept of situated learning is applied to this domain as situated leadership, where leadership activity is defined by the leader, the followers, and the specifics of the situation. Distributed leadership can be broken down into 5 arenas. For our purposes, the implementation of a planful alignment is best suited for the environment. Following consultation with all project partners, learners, sponsoring institutions, government, and businesses, resources and responsibilities are deliberately distributed to those individuals within specific areas that are best placed to lead a particular function or task. This is the process of path identification within each organization, agency, and institution. It is the heart of the leadership plan. This is the planful activity of avoiding chaos and inspiring innovation within a systems model. The shared leadership model places a finer point on distributed leadership by actively promoting leadership within the daily work and visioning of the organization. This process allows for multiple leaders and leadership styles to manifest simultaneously so that a rich cross-pollination of thought and expertise can flourish. This type of leadership empowers individuals within the organization to take risks, analyze strategies, and innovate when environments are complex and changing. It flattens the leadership horizon and supports the processes of multiple interconnected systems of operation. An example of how this might be instituted for this project, we consider the organization and functions of the higher education institution. These have been designed with the post-secondary student in mind. In order to accommodate marginalized lower-level learners, the knowledge base of curriculum, pathways, resources, and expertise need to be negotiated based on the needs of the learners and the capacities of the institution, the unbundling, and the microlearning. Opportunities for support, networks, and credentialing are aligned with curriculum standards and practices, or the microlearning and bridging processes, and the experience and graduateness areas would be negotiated as needed within the program. The expertise and feedback loops within a complex system would guide the shared leadership to adopt the most feasible process based on the circumstances of the situation. All of these models considered together, the systems theory, the complexity model, distributed leadership, shared leadership, coalesce to bring us down to the point of the ecological model for multiple leadership consideration. We'll provide a brief overview of how that might look in this type of a project.
Consideration of these leadership models leads to the implementation of a final organizational model for leadership, one which integrates and supports the systems and models existing across all partners in the project. This model borrows from concepts of ecological frameworks forwarded by Bronfenbrenner in examining the interdependencies of complex relationships within society. While the particular elements of the model can change, the organizational considerations remain. We've identified the partners and organizations that the Level Up project would engage with to integrate into existing educational streams. We'll discuss each of these briefly and what they bring to the project equation. These can be considered to be levels of influence and are interdependent, acting like ripples in a pond to impact systems contained within the spheres of influence. At the heart of the model is the learner. We identified our target audience and the issues around marginalization which interrupt the education process. The needs, challenges, barriers, strengths, and situations are examined when creating the project and in designing the fit for higher education sponsors. The next level is the project itself, identifying partners within the process. In the next slide, we see that research stated that communities within which the learners live greatly impact capacities and opportunities of the learners. Integration of community values, standards, expectations, and goals is crucial. It is the cultural cement that supports education and growth. Curricular and support elements are crucial here. Next is the sponsoring institution within which the project will be situated. This needs to be a full integration rather than an add-on to make education effective. The structure and organizational goals have been established to support education and training. A refocusing on shared goals allows incremental changes in administration, teaching, learning, and research to make monumental change innovation. Governmental bodies need to be active participants in redefining pathways that can access funding and credentialing agreements to support projects such as Level Up. Identifying the pathways and personnel within these agencies is crucial. It should be considered an expansion of service rather than a new service. The final sphere of influence, but no less important, is that of international organizations and industry. They are the collaborating partners who can advocate for changes and drive resources into governmental streams, based on economic needs.
The Level Up project is designed specifically for the online learning environment. Based on its flexible entry points, sequencing, and pacing, it can meet the needs of learners whose life circumstances have precluded them from attending a bricks-and-mortar institution. It is a scalable model designed to capitalize on short learning moments with specific skill outcomes using a variety of devices, from computers to laptops to mobile devices. Mobile devices such as smartphones are the most prevalent devices available to many marginalized learners and can provide access to microlearning content 24/7. This model meets the needs of the learners identified in our case study from Namibia and Aboriginal learners in Canada. This is an innovative approach to addressing the growing segment of undereducated citizens. Access to self-guided and self-directed pathways would improve not only the economic issues facing families and communities, but provide access to an untapped pool of skilled, educated workers so desperately needed in the 21st century learning environment.